Hello friends, good morning and welcome to the EduSite Network. Our topic of discussion today is diaspora writing, and for this very discussion we have the Sana studio Dr. Anand Prakash, retired professor of English, University of Delhi. He has a teaching experience of more than 4 decades and his publications include Wuthering Heights and Interpretation, another book, Marxist Literary Theory, amongst of course many others. And with this brief introduction, I would like to welcome sir to our studio. Thank you so much sir for coming. And I also request you to begin now today's lecture.
Thank you, Urvashi. And welcome viewers to this discussion on what is called diaspora writing. And it's an important topic today. It may not have been so important, let's say 40, 50 years ago. But there are two things that I have to say about diaspora writing, that is. Diaspora per se is a phenomenon that occurs right from the beginning of human civilization, as old as the hills, as old as the human civilization is. People have been moving around from one place to another, from one country to another, from one region within the country to another, from one continent to another, and they have been always in the process of shifting, always in the process of knowing the outer world away from their home, and it's both important and a bit problematic. But diaspora writing is a different ball game. Diaspora writing is that which treats the activity of diaspora, the phenomena of diaspora, as a subject of depiction in novels, in poems, etc. And one knows, that a specific genre in literature, and diaspora writing is a genre, emerges at a particular time. And the time that is associated with diaspora writing is the second half of the 20th century. Now, I don't have to go into the details of the 20th century that generated the diaspora, except saying that, there was a kind of mass upheaval in the world in the second half of the 20th century, following the phenomena of the Second World War, and the world seemed to be redefined, seemed to be redrawn by the impact of the Second World War, and new nations emerged. And within the nations, movements of communities also, took place. So, roughly speaking, the second half of 20th century has seen this emergence of, in an important way, of diaspora writing. So, first let's take up what diaspora is, because many viewers may not be knowing this new term. It's less discussed a subject. It has been discussed only in the last 10-15 years. But before that, people only talked vaguely about diaspora. And of course, now the discourse, a separate, independent discourse of diaspora is being discussed at various levels in the academia and in the wider, field of knowledge. So, what is diaspora? And one can say lots of things about diaspora, particularly with respect to the use of words that come to mind. For instance, diaspora is generally shifting. It is going away. It is leaving a place. So one has lived at a certain place for some time, for a long time, maybe for as long as one knows, and then a particular incident or happening occurs, because of which people think of shifting from that place to another. So that is what diaspora is, that when people shift, and straight away lots of examples come to mind when people shift. In India, there has been a great shifting, which is connected with partition. Whole communities, whole formations, social formations, they shifted ground from one place to another, and that created in its wake a large number of issues, problems, questions. So, well, when you shift from one place to another as a group in society, and not to come back home, generally, that is what diaspora would mean. The other word that comes to mind is it is scattering, shifting and scattering. Scattering in the sense, you know, that human formation, social formations at a particular place, they go in different directions under the impact of certain events, and wherever they go, then you know that area is inhabited in a different manner, and if they go in different directions, then it's a kind of a scattering that, you know, descriptively happens, you know, of that community. So you can have, you know, certain populations in India which have shifted and scattered over the entire globe in the last 60, 70 or 100 years, or even more. And you have, you know, we have, you know, our own friends, relatives, and countrymen, you know, found in almost all corners of the world. So in a way, if you look at it descriptively, then they have scattered all over the world. So there is England, there is America, there is Germany, there is France, there are African countries, there are you know, East Asian countries and all. So wherever you go, you meet somebody or the other, you know, who resembles you, you know, from the dress, from the language, etc. And therefore, you know, the scattering has occurred, and that is also diaspora. The third word, you know, that comes in this context is migration. So you migrate. Now, migrating has the element of you know, going legally. Legally, in the sense, you know, that you take permission from your country. You also ensure that, you know, the other place to which you are going will welcome you to a certain extent, and with mutual consent of the two community, of the two societies and countries, you know, you go there and settle down there. Now, this migration, of course, is a legal term these days. You know, you have to require a passport, you have to go there, you have to find a job, you have to give the income proof, and you have the home address, of course, so that, you know, you can be repatriated or all those things, and expatriated. So that way, migration is also an important word. So it's not merely diaspora, but a specific kind of going away from one's place. And wherever you know, shifting and you know, scattering occurs at the level of you know, societies and communities, the migration can be also at the individual level. So one migrates, the individual migrates, and that has its own implications. Then uprooting, a negative word, because when you decide to leave a place and go elsewhere, and particularly if it's done forcibly, certain circumstances compelled one to leave one's place, or a whole community to leave its place and go elsewhere, then you had struck roots earlier in your home, and then you were taken away from there by the force of circumstances, and you went elsewhere. And uprooting then also is rerouting there. You strike roots there, and that is a, you know, that's a pattern, you know, which is difficult to comprehend from a distance. Only that person knows what uprooting is who has been uprooted. So one leaves one's you know, traditions, conventions, customs, etc. behind, and when one goes there, then one is face to face with the new situations where, you know, things may not be as easy to accept or reject as was the case with the place that one left. So uprooting has this negative, violent connotation, that you are taken away from your roots and you go elsewhere. And I have seen, for instance, you know, that people who left India, whose forefathers left India in the 19th century, they came back after 100 years or 150 years as individuals, sometimes also as small groups like 50 people, 100 people. They contact a travel agent and they fly back to India, and then, you know, I met some people, you know, who were studying in Delhi University. The students' parents came here, and I said, what have the parents come for? And then, you know, my students told me that they had come to see their roots. So they didn't know where their forefathers went from. They had a vague idea. And they would, you know, take a bus or a train, or they would fly from, you know, Delhi to that place, and then they would remember certain names which they are, which came from memory and association, and they went there, and then when they came back, they said, yes, we saw our village. And people said, some people got apprehensive, that these people who lived here and perhaps are thinking of coming back, and who knows what has happened behind their back. Maybe they had some land here, and they will ask for the land, and so there were apprehensions. So imagine that somebody came to just find out where one's great-great-grandfather lived, and decided finally to leave this place. And these apprehensions occur today, that these people might come back. And of course, they had no intention of coming back, but then this fear somehow struck the people who were left behind. So anyway, why do people want to look up their roots? And my answer is that people have been hearing stories and tales about others, the elders in their own community, away from their home, those stories, imaginatively took them to a different plane of reality, different plane of existence. And instead of accepting the situation in front of them that faced them, they start thinking of that past which they never saw, and perhaps they start comparing that past, that imagined past, with the actual present, and that creates in them a sense of nostalgia. How one wishes that one was where one was born, and how things would have been. So you start imagining, you start looking fondly at the past which you have heard about. So that is nostalgia, and nostalgia is a great feeling. It takes you away from your present day realities, and it creates a kind of wonderland. Nostalgia, viewers, is never painful. Nostalgia is always something, a matter of relating fondly to something. So it's like remembering one's childhood. So when one is grown up, one is in fact middle-aged or old, then one thinks of the childhood memories, and the childhood appears to be glorious at that time. So no a person of 50 or 60 years ever realizes that he or she was beaten up by the neighbors or by their parents themselves. They always think of a helping hand touching them on their shoulders when they were children. So nostalgia is a sweet kind of a mental or imaginative occurrence, and these people then become more pained, because from that sweet background to the present day contentions and difficulties that one faces, one realizes that one wishes that one had remained there. So this nostalgia is a feeling. It's a feeling. It's a real feeling, and it's a feeling that cuts you away for a short while from the present day events and happenings. So there is a phenomena of nostalgia that is being generated by remaining away from home in different surroundings, and that phenomena which generates it also is very deeply linked with what one calls diaspora. And there are many more things, and these things will be seen in the case of people who write, who write poems, who write short stories, who go to myths and legends. So how many kinds of meaning would be embedded in the fact of, in the reality of diaspora? One can't tell, and therefore I stop here so far as the first point is concerned, and say, well, this is what diaspora is, that it's a shifting, it's a scattering all over the globe, it's a migration, it's an uprooting, it's nostalgia generating phenomena, and something more. So this is what we are confronted with. Now,
Sir, just a small query that has come up. I just wanted to ask you that we discussed the idea that diaspora means something shifting, scattering. You mentioned shifting is different from migrating, and either being uprooted, going by your own will, or being sent by force. So then can we say that diaspora writing, diaspora literature would only be that which is written by people outside their home country? It cannot say be qualified or ascribed to somebody who's writing within the country, say after independence. The feeling of diaspora can only be attached to somebody who has been uprooted or somebody who has shifted or migrated from outside and is writing about his or her experiences of their past and the present?
Broadly, that is the case. Broadly, that is the case. So the diaspora would mean, that leaving one's country or community or society.
Right.
But some countries have very big proportions. For instance, India is not exactly a country; it's a subcontinent.
Right.
So you have the eastern India, western India, etc., etc. So people shift from. Then suddenly, sometimes there is a division within the country, like partition occurred in India. So people who were forced to leave out this place and go over to Pakistan, or vice versa. They were living in Pakistan and then they came here. That also is diaspora. Right, in fact, in the case of scattering, one can also think of the labor population shifting from one place to another. Like so there are certain states, where there is more poverty and there is less of development, and there are more jobs elsewhere in other states within the same country. So population shift from one region to another region, and then they have to live with a new reality. So broadly, it's between countries and larger societies. But at the smaller level, some kind of diaspora always occurs in human situations. Like in Delhi, there are people who come from all parts of India.
Right.
And when they come, then they leave behind their customs and even their language and culture, and they live in different surroundings here. That also has something to do with diaspora. So it's a good question you are raising. And when it comes to writing about this experience, then writers talk of diaspora in this sense also. So because they come from that language, they in fact enrich the new language that they adopt, because they use the words from that language. Their pronunciation also adds color to the speech. How many kinds of Hindi do we speak in Delhi, and how many kind of other languages do we speak? All this is a part of diaspora.
Absolutely.
So you are right in saying that diaspora has lots of variety. That's why I said something more, something still more, because these variations and these shades of experience and different conditions, that all is connected with diaspora. It is because of this reason that people who write today, they go into these these finer questions of diaspora and write beautiful prose, beautiful poetry, give new ideas, also criticize certain things and conditions. So this is what it is. So I agree with you that the diaspora has to be constantly redefined and constantly understood in newer situations. So let's now go back to this particular aspect of diaspora where the community shifts, or a part of the community or a part of the society shifts. For instance, the first very important happening of diaspora occurred in the case of the shifting of Jewish population. They were under persecution, and religious hatred and intolerance was rampant at that time, and they were not welcome at the place where they lived, and they were outnumbered by other people. It may have been also a kind of exploitation then, that the Jews were rich, they were money lenders, and they were more intelligent, they were more manipulative, they could work their imagination better, they were modern perhaps, or in order to assert themselves, because they were minority at that time, they would go back to their old myths, and they would try to show their supremacy or sense of distinction. So all these things were there. For this reason, these people were compelled to leave from one place to another, and till the other day, they had no country to call their own. They were not welcome in Europe. They are still not welcome in Europe and in America. And finally, they got a place, and where they went, Israel, for instance, even there, there are problems, because then you come in touch with other communities, and who knows what game is being played behind the shifting of population of diaspora in the 20th century, particularly with respect to Jews. So that's the first instance of, or one of the first instances of diaspora on a big scale. Many more would have been there before that also, who knows. After all, where did the Red Indians in America come from? There are a large number of historical conjectures, but nobody can tell for sure. And well, there is a controversy in India regarding Aryans. Some people believe that Aryans are Indians, and some others say that Aryans came from elsewhere. So that kind of diaspora also is there. And then, well, there is an examples galore. Anyway, the point I am making is that when a large chunk of population shifts from one place to another, then certain problems occur, and that these are the problems of diaspora. For instance, a new kind of life pattern comes into being at the new place. The people have left behind their customs and their friends, their relatives, even their enemies. They have come away from them, and the place which they reach, the place where they would settle down, that place will have its own inhabitants with their own culture, with its own culture, and therefore a kind of clash and a process of accommodation would occur at the new place, and that will change the pattern, both in the case of those who go there and also in the case of those who are joined there by the people who left their original homes. Then the question of language. When you leave a place, when I leave a place and go hundreds of miles or thousands of miles away from my place, then it's one encounters a different language. So how do you communicate with those people? Well, you can use hand gestures. You can also use certain words which are common to both. Then you learn the grammar of the new place. Then the people with whom you talk, they also learn your grammar and your language. So a kind of new language, a new mixture also may emerge. But generally, what takes precedence is the language that is spoken at the place to which people have gone. So that means that there is a new language. So languages also are experimented with. New words are coined for new situations and for new things that are seen. Then a kind of inequality, a kind of an unequal situation, that somebody is superior, somebody is inferior, somebody is rich, somebody is poor, somebody is skilled, and somebody else is less skilled, etc. This kind of inequality occurs in the wake of the diaspora existence, and which means that the people who come from elsewhere and be at the new place, they are generally in a position of subservience. These people will be suppressed. These people will be looked down upon. They will be criticized. They'll be treated with sympathy, mercy, pity, etc. In India, there is a term called Sharanarthi, refugees. Now, these are the terms which means that the people are less privileged than those others, who originally stay here. And also this leads to the communities that have shifted from their old home. This leads to their new role. What kind of role will they play? Will they belong to this new place? Will they be a part of this community? Will they be serving them? Will they for themselves be sustaining a certain activity? And they will be thinking about this new role also. For instance, when one is at a different place, so one has one kind of a role to play vis-a-vis one's community. So you will tell the members of your community that you have to be here, and there is no alternative, etc. At the same time, you will say that these people also are good. Some of them are bad, of course, but some people are bad elsewhere also. So you become a thinker, and you start thinking. You start playing a role of a thinker. There are certain others, who play the role of organizers. They organize. For instance, if a person of your community wants a job, or certain people want a job, then some people can say, okay, let me talk to the powers that be in the new place. So you have organizational things, you have articulation things, etc. that come your way, and you start playing a new role. And then and this point I hinted at earlier also, but now I say that you have a choice to live in the present, or you have to live in the past. Most of the people live in the present. They went away under certain force of circumstances. So they had to earn their livelihood, earn their bread, and that gave them work, and they started working. And then they say, okay, this place gives me work, therefore I belong here. There are certain others who are more dreamy, who are more creative, and they say, no, we have a good memory, and this thing happened, and we lost so much, and these people are being very cruel to us. So how one wishes, that one could go back, and they cannot go back. So there is a kind of plane of memory that one has in front of us, in front of oneself, and there is of course the sharper and the starker plane of reality in front of them. Now, finally, and I'll then move on to the other domain of diaspora existence and experience. But then the writer, the poet, the artist among these people who have shifted the place, because one always is also a person of culture, a product and a producer of culture. So there is a sense of split that occurs within the mind of the person who has shifted. So split is who one is, whether one is a citizen of this place or one is a citizen of that place from where one came. And there are two persons living in the same person. There's a kind of, this is manifest at the level of bilingualism or multilingualism. Maybe earlier you spoke two languages, and now there are two or three more languages that you speak here. So you become multilingual. And speaking different languages within one's a short span creates a sense of split in one's mind. So which language is yours? Which word is yours? Which word you coined? Which word somebody else coined and you misunderstood? So all these things, they have a large number of implications. And I wrote down experience of split within oneself, explaining to oneself who one is. That's a very difficult question. Who am I? Am I the person who lives here, or am I the person who came from somewhere else? Or am I both? Or am I neither? So all these questions occur, explaining to oneself who one is. The person who came from elsewhere, or the one who is forced to become another. So here you are a different person here, but when you left the place at that point of time, you were different. So these planes of spiritual existence, imaginative existence, existence at the level of experiences over a long period of time, these start engaging the mind of the person who is part of a community that shifted to the present place a long time ago. And let me now then recapitulate. We start from what diaspora is, then we go into the implications of diaspora over history. Then we realize that finally a kind of split at the level of personality has occurred, and therefore a background is created against which we stand today in the 21st or the 20th century. Now, recent examples of diaspora experience. One of the most important examples for us of diaspora experience is the 19th century example of what is called indentured labor. Indentured labor. These people were taken away from here, and certain goals were set for them. Maybe a decision was taken in some other countries. There, the people who had captured land and who wanted labor, the workers there, they didn't have enough labor there, and they wanted to produce more and more. And then they said, okay, let's think of a country where there's a population of the poor people. And somebody would have suggested, let's go to India. India is a very poor country in the 19th century, and those who know history will bear me out. That 19th century is one of the worst centuries that India saw, because there were so many famines and so many deaths occurred. And then, it may have occurred to some people that labor is very cheap here. So somebody came and told the people in the villages or the small towns, why don't you go from here to another country, which is a kind of golden land, in El Dorado. So you go there and you become rich, and you don't feel you don't have to come back, or if you want to come back, you can come back as soon as you want. And this kind of a dream was shown to the people in the villages in India, and they said, okay, then we go. And these people were packed in the small boats. They were put in the small boats, and they started sailing across the seas. And they might have reached, certain islands much away from India in a matter of months. And when they reached there, they found that there were just fields, there was just bare earth, and they had to work on it, and they had to. And if they didn't like the work, then they had no way to come back to. Who will hire boats for them, and who will give them money to come back there? So they got stuck there, and they didn't have any skills of that kind of agriculture which they had here. So they had to learn the skills, and then that they were put at a particular place in small huts, and those huts would be near the fields, and if you have huts near the fields, then there are no facilities. Then at night, there might be wildlife and you are not secure, and so you have to huddle together with the others. And if some of us, those who went there, if they felt tired, if they were ill, etc., then that would be a burden on the employer, and the employer cannot brook this kind of a thing. So maybe somebody gets thrown out, or somebody just dies there. Then punishment, violence, all these things were there. So these indentured labor with some kind of a bond, with some kind of legal bond, where you do it with all kinds of pacts, etc. So this labor was condemned to live in foreign lands for a period of time that couldn't be easily measured. So this is, and these people, at that point of time, went in thousands, and they got literally scattered over different islands, for instance, West Indies, Trinidad, etc., and Fiji, and they would be called Indians there, and they would be neither very black, they would be nor very white. And there are people who have come from elsewhere. Some people have invested money in those islands for crops. And so there is a multicultural kind of atmosphere at the place, and Indians do not know how to belong to one or the other, group of people there. So this is the kind of life, that the indentured labor lived in the islands or in countries like South Africa. Gandhiji's example, this is a very good example. People had gone in the 19th century to South Africa, and they were facing hardship, and they required a lawyer to fight a case, for them. And Gandhiji decided, as soon as he did his bar at law in the last decade of the 19th century, then it's decided to go to Africa and fight for their rights, legal rights, etc. So that's how, so that's the biggest and the most significant example of diaspora existence, that India had large chunks of population shifting to different parts of the world, and there they made their new home, and it was historically it was a kind of experiment in assimilation and accommodation. At the level of individuals, it was a very violent kind of a phenomena that the Indians witnessed.
Sir, if I can interrupt you at this point, a slight query from my side. We just discussed the idea that moving to another place, either shifting or migrating, and there's a one becomes multilingual, which creates a sense of split, not able to understand which language is yours when you speak, which word may be yours, or which word has been coined by another one. And also the question arises of who am I? Who am I really? Do I belong here? Do I belong there? And I would like to take the example of Amitav Ghosh, his writing style. He constantly shuttles between, say, one set of space to another. He will, for instance, if he's talking about India, then in the next paragraph he will be talking about Bangladesh. So there's a constant movement and a shifting. So can we see that? Can we say that this shifting and this kind of constant movement going back and forth may be part of this confusion of who am I? Could we ascribe that?
Yes, you hit the nail on the head. This is precisely the question, because existence today has become so very uncertain, so very vague, so very mobile. That the shifting has become the proper central point. Earlier, people would not change, their perceptions over ages, over centuries, and in the 20th and 21st centuries, you see people shifting from always remaining in a shifty position. So the Amitav Ghosh is able to manifest it, reflect it at the level of language and the behavior that he imagines in the case of characters. So that's quite true. So this is one of the diaspora aspect of reality that reflects through social living experiences, language use, communication, articulation, all those things. So right. That's quite correct.
Right. Thank you, sir.
So, but I'm glad that you have shown the kind of direction that diaspora will take finally with respect to articulation and expression. And of course, apart from that, also at the level of creative endeavor and representation in literature. One can go into the very area of genres, literary genres that emerge because there are pressures of the diaspora experience working on it. So Indians going as labor to islands in search of work and to earn a living. So initial requirement is that one should not starve. One should somehow decide to live comfortably. Now comfort will come at a price, and as I already told you, those violent things were very part of the life of the people who went away from here in the 19th century. And they may not have been Indians when they went in the sense that they called themselves Indians. Maybe they called themselves part of a certain language, a part of a certain region in India. But once they went there, then they were called Indians. Now see, our identity we get as Indians when we go away from there. And then some people who were sympathetic to them, they might have asked, what kind of a life did you leave behind? And then they would start thinking of that. And when you think of certain things, to explain to others, then you realize that there was a kind of unity when you were here, and that there was that element of Indianness in you. So you started defining. I start defining when I go away from here elsewhere. When somebody asks a question, what do you do there back home? And then in the process of defining, I realized I'm an Indian and I'm like many others. So identity, a kind of concept, this emerges very clearly when one is away from one's home, and when one has to prove oneself that this is what one is and this is where one has come from. So they went to earn their living. They went to work as workers, as people who work on the fields, etc. But work would be there for 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day, sometimes 15, 16 hours a day. And in the leisure time, if there was any leisure time, then they would sit, they would discuss, and they would think of these questions that you have talked about. So obviously, when workers go from one place to another, they come in conflict with the workers there, because the wages will fall, because there will be more supply of the labor, and the pressure of the employers will be still harder on the working population. The employer can say, okay, if you don't want to work for 16 hours a day, then I'll get another who is starving outside on the road. I'll get him or her, and he or she will work. I'm bringing in the she and the her here deliberately, because these people would be the population of the workers would be replenished every 20 years. The employer in the new place would always require a new generation to replace you when you become old. So when you went from here at the age of 20 years, when you are 40, then there must be a new generation, which means that there should be women also going along with men, who will make the family, who will also then give birth to children, and those children grow up there, and that way a new kind of question emerges in the process of living at that place. So first thing is that they come in conflict with the existing communities there, because those people will be hard hit by the presence of these new people who came. And then, as I have already said, they will come in the control of the employers, and difficult conditions of work, since the terms are set by the employers. It's the employers who will tell you what to do, where to live. It's the employers who will tell you what to wear and what not to wear. If there is as I said earlier, if somebody falls ill, then the employer will tell you whether you have to take the medicine or you have to just go and die, and then somebody else will come and do your work, because your identity is that of a worker, is not of a human being who requires all the facilities like medicine, like food, and like care, etc. So those things also are there, and they are very exploitative, they are very violent, they are very cruel and merciless, and these things of course are a part of life. Then this having a family, having a marriage, doing the rituals that authenticates all these relationships and customs, this also, with the passage of time, this also will grow, will come into being. So when there are young men and women, they might also like each other, and they would like to live together. Or maybe when there are families and there are children, one has to communicate with children, and children ask questions, and children also cry, and children also laugh, and a kind of color, a kind of pain, a kind of difficulty is added to the situation and the atmosphere. And when these children grow up, when a child is not 5 years but 10 years, then the parents have to also think of giving them education, or giving them skills, or putting up with them in terms of togetherness. So and maybe certain schools are opened, and the parent has the choice of putting the child in work or in the school. So all these problems then will multiply. Then going with changes as time passes, and in the process gaining a different identity than the one already that existed before. Now, at the wider historical level, what has also happened is that life in the place that was adopted newly brought in not merely difficulties and challenges, but also initiatives. For instance, life back home in India for these indentured labor was a static life. It would be the same kind of life that was lived in the 18th century, for instance. So in 100 years, very little had happened. But when you go there, and when you are face to face with new people and new work, where new techniques are evolved, where finished goods would be sent from which one has created, the new population is created. Finished goods would go elsewhere, where they'll get the aspect of market, they'll sell better. And then new techniques are once again invented, once again thought of, and then people will become more productive. So this process of change brings about conditions in which these people also might outclass certain others. For instance, in the islands, maybe some of the Indian groups will fare better than the black groups or the others. And maybe certain Indians are so very resourceful in the new place that they'll form a group of their own. They'll start, competing with the other employers, and they might have their own, property after some time. After all, those people who are propertied in these islands today and have belonged to India, this property didn't come into their hands just one day. It has been a part of a process. Maybe 50 years ago, somebody did much better than others, and this person bought property. So if your own countrymen, have property, then they will treat you differently. Then they will be more harsh with those who don't belong to them. And you also, because when you see that your countryman is employing you elsewhere, then you will also be more faithful too. So all these variations will occur in one's living. And the movement is towards working with your hands to working at the level of planning, working at the level of controlling certain resources, competing with those people, and if there is politics, if there are plans, etc., then of course you are a part of that planning and that politics. So this also is set in, and well, I have certain things in mind, certain details in mind, on the strength of which I am saying all these things, but I will come to that a little later. So as time passes, new processes come into being, and a new kind of identity is being constantly forged. This identity was not there 20 years ago, but now it is there, and people can see it for themselves that they behave differently from what they did 10 years or 15 years ago. So owning of property and laying claim to the island in question. After all, one can start saying this island belongs to me. I am a worker here. You already become a citizen there, and you have certain rights. Maybe some kind of a political groups in the meantime has come into being. Maybe some kind of interaction has happened between people of this island and people elsewhere. After all, ideas travel from one place to another. If the island people, some of them, belong to England, and when they come here, then of course they are employers, but they are also human beings. So they have seen a different kind of political atmosphere in England, and when they come here, then some people may be less sympathetic, but some others will be more sympathetic with the workers here. So who knows, maybe there is a radical or a socialist comes from England among the employers, and he starts making unions of these people, or allowing them to form a union to fight for their rights, and then the political spectrum is further enriched. So this is the kind of situation that keeps changing from one mode of living to another, and this lends variety as well as significance to these things. Now, I told you about the background against which I was placing all these things, and the background is traced very well by a writer called V.S. Naipaul, who got the Nobel Prize a few years ago, and his famous novel is A House for Mr. Biswas, and this novel is situated in Trinidad and Tobago, and in this novel V.S. Naipaul has traced the lineage of families and communities in Trinidad, where somebody came as a poor person, but gradually when the next generation came, then things changed. So now there were people who were observing Indian customs, but then there were others in the community who had not seen any Indian customs directly. So they started learning from their own experience, learning from their books, learning from their syllabi and from their school, etc. And they started challenging conventions within their own community, which means that V.S. Naipaul's novel, A House for Mr. Biswas, which is a good 600 or 700 pages, this novel traces the evolution of generations of these people who went away from India in the 19th century. And imagine the kind of names that they have. Names are still Indian there. In fact, I tell you viewers that when I was teaching my honors academic classes in Delhi University, then I had a large number of people, particularly in the honors classes, coming from these islands, and I could not initially see what their names meant. So somebody was Rahim Bekas, and I didn't know what Rahim Bekas was, but suddenly one day it struck me that the person's name was actually Rahim Baksh, and he didn't know how to put spellings into it, and he called himself Bekas. And there were some such names. There is another gentleman, he is still in touch with me. His name is Jugdish, and later on I realized it was Jagdish. So the names are there from India, and they spell them differently, maybe under the impact of French or the local language which is called Creole. So they got their names from there. But then, as they change their names, as they change their view of life, as they also change their ideas, the same way they impact the life around them. So this is to be, and all this is given. For instance, there is a now in this novel, House for Mr. Biswas, there is a place called Hanuman House. Hanuman House is a kind of a building in which there would be 20 rooms or 10 rooms, and in each room there is a family, and this gives a kind of shelter to different families. And because this larger family has people who are young, who are children, who are old people. So the old people think of matchmaking, and certain marriages happen in Hanuman House. And then of course the Hanuman House appears to be small for the larger population that is there in Hanuman House. So people shift from this place to another, and then they keep coming, and all these things are shown graphically by V.S. Naipaul to show that this is how these people change from one kind of life to another, and the progress could be clearly defined in terms of education, in terms of new ideas, in terms of modernity that these people saw. Some people left this place and went over to England. They also, of course, they come to other parts of the world, and from there they carry back new ideas. So this is one aspect, and I thought I'll go in detail, and I have treated this within detail. Now I have little time to talk about the writing, which is called the diaspora writing proper, because I already indicated the kind of experiences that will be formulated, that will be represented in writing, and the question of identity, for instance, the question of language, the question of justice, the question of equality. These things would be captured by writers under the category of diaspora. And well, the best example is, of course, V.S. Naipaul in this case, so far as India is concerned, and he has not written just one book, House for Mr. Biswas, but a large number of books. And imagine that this person wouldn't have directly seen India for a very long time. but he was all the time talking about India. And then he became so interested in India when he grew up, that he traveled to India, he wrote books about India. And what does it mean? Did he live in India or in Trinidad? The answer is difficult to give, because all through he has been living in India imaginatively. Only physically he was there, but he was grappling with the question of identity, culture, language, and he was talking about India. So when he comes back here, he is full of pain, because the Indians there finally emerged as very successful people, and there's not that kind of poverty in Trinidad or elsewhere, in Fiji, in Mauritius, etc. that we see here. Therefore, when the people from that place come to India, then they realize that India is still a poor country. In fact, V.S. Naipaul wrote a whole book called India, A Wounded Civilization. So he called India, this is the title of his book, and that he was very angry there. After that, he has written, on the communal situation, on the conditions of people who believe in religion, etc. And he is a great critic. One may not accept his views. One may find his views sometimes, irrational also. But that's not the point. The point is that the person has been concerned with what happens in India, what happens in Pakistan, in India what happens in Bombay, what happens with other communities. So the person has remained, in spite of being physically away, he has remained basically an Indian. And an Indian who is dissatisfied, an Indian who is angry. And this is the diaspora writing that is very significant for us. What about Gandhiji? Gandhiji also wrote. Of course, he was not a literary writer, but then he wrote his his autobiography and his account of life scattered over chapters. And he was also very angry. He was also totally disapproving the kind of things that Indians suffered in South Africa. And he became very active politically in South Africa. And at one point of time, people said, if you want to bring about change, then why remain stuck to South Africa? Why don't you come back to India? And so he came back to India, and after he became active here, a person who was a product of the diaspora existence for a good number of years at the turn of the century, this person comes here and he starts looking at India from different angles, from different perspectives, and realizes that the best way to serve India is to take part in it politically. And when he takes part here politically in this country, then he starts contributing to change to such an extent that finally he is called the father of the nation. So you can imagine that diaspora can create personalities, and Gandhiji had not shifted there and settled down there, but he went there. He saw diaspora happening in front of his eyes, in terms of changes, etc. And when he came here, then he had that multilingual or multicultural or multi-ideological perspective, which gave him all kinds of ideas inside. So Urvashi, your point that somebody has to go outside to be a diasporic is only partially true. Because Gandhiji went there, but he saw and came back. Right. And here he is not diaspora, and yet he is able to compare things and contrast things, and then have a kind of strategy. So I look at it in a mixed manner. Well, diaspora is a kind of symbolizing of the trend of going away, meeting new people, coming back with enriched experience, going through pain, and becoming more and more sensitive, with the passage of time. And well, this can't be helped. The only thing is that it has to be contended. It has to be faced, and a good answer has to be given to the existing problems through it. So viewers, I'll now. Is there anything that you'd like to ask in this case? Because I'm now coming to the present diaspora of a different kind.
Right. Nothing to ask, sir, but a very interesting point you highlighted, that diaspora can create personalities. Perhaps it is also to be observed that when say an Indian moves out of their country, they become more sympathetic towards their home country. They realize that they had not felt or expressed so much love that they had for the country. And a lot of Indians which live abroad also do a lot of social work. they do things, they contribute perhaps financially or otherwise for the country. So I would rightly agree with what you said, that even if Gandhi ji had been abroad for a short while, it allowed him to think in such a way that he wanted to come back and do so much for the country.
Well, now I can stretch the point that you are making. I can say that this diaspora has finally created a situation in which India needs their help, and therefore they are being called back to play some important role there. The other day, the Prime Minister of India, he invited these people who left their home, who left India, to come back and to contribute to the economic might of the country. So in fact, yesterday, today, and day before yesterday, we have had these people coming from outside. They have a new home there, but they are coming back, and they are called Pravasi Bharatiya. And this Pravasi element, this is being discussed in India by all the newspapers. So this is the kind of political thing that has occurred, and nobody could anticipate this 100 years ago or 50 years ago. You know, that Indians going out from here will be back, and they'll be given that sense of ease here, that they can invest their money and all and contribute to the economic might of India. So that's quite true. Now, this discussion cannot do justice, because of the paucity of time, to all the important aspects of diaspora writing, which has been suggested through this discussion. But I tell you that a different kind of diaspora has occurred in the last 30, 40 years, 50 years. And this diaspora is not the kind of the diaspora that I have talked about. It's not about the 19th century exodus of a large number of Indians going to different islands and settling down there and becoming citizens there for all time to come. They will not come back, because they have struck their roots there. And no love for the country will compel them to come back, because after all, their loyalties have shifted from India to that place. And understandably, if somebody comes and stays here for a century or so and becomes an Indian, then that person remains an Indian for a long time to come. But you know, there is a new trend of this is called diaspora, call it migration. I don't know what it should be called. But you know, in the last 30, 40 years, middle class individuals in India, they have started, you know, shifting place from here to those developed countries where they'll get better jobs. So a large number of doctors, a large number of engineers, a large number of technicians, a large number of people belonging to other areas, scientists, they are shifting from our country to that place. Some people, you know, it started in the early 20th century or late 19th century, and the old Congress leaders, they called it brain drain. So brain drain is one activity. We produce economic resources in terms of human beings, workers, and these people are taken away from off the shelf by the companies there, and they are given good homes and good conditions, and there they live. So whether they are writers, whether they are scientists, doctors, engineers, or craftsmen or whatever, these people are tempted to leave India to make money there, and from there they would wield some power here also. And this is a phenomena that also is under the broader umbrella of diaspora. And Urvashi, you talked about Amitav Ghosh, you talked about other writers, diaspora writers. There are writers here. There are very young writers these days. There is a lady called Jhumpa Lahiri.
Yes.
There is a lady called Chitra Banerjee. And you know, these people did their schooling here. Then or some people, you know, are children of people who shifted to America as professionals. And finally they found that they could write about India. They come here, they compare and contrast India with America.
Right.
And mostly they write. Mostly they express themselves in literature. So it's not doctors who write. It's doctors' wives, you know, who turn writers. Or it's a woman doctor and her husband turns a writer. Right. Like we have certain actors, you know, who went to there is that, and these people live there, and they keep coming back here, and they write quite a great deal.
Right. Sir, really sorry to interrupt you, but we have come to the close of time. But I would like to assure our viewers that we would perhaps continue with this discussion at some point with Sir, of course, And with this, thank you friends for watching, and thank you so much sir for being here. Thank you friends. Have a great day.